The galaxy was in chaos. With the Zephyrian Empire gone, hundreds of species that had been hiding or living as slaves suddenly found themselves free. Some praised humanity as heroes who had saved them. Others feared that humans would become the new masters of the galaxy. But Jake Morrison and his fellow commanders knew something that none of the other species understood. The real war had not even started yet. Jake stood in the crystal command center of Terra's shield, reading reports from the architect computers. The ancient machines were detecting movement at the very edge of the galaxy, far beyond where any living species had ever traveled. Something huge was coming toward them, and it was not friendly. All species representatives, please gather on. Sanctuary Prime, Admiral Helen Carter announced across the galaxy. We have important information to share about a threat that affects everyone. Sanctuary Prime was a neutral world where different species met to talk about galactic problems. Within 2 weeks, representatives from hundreds of civilizations had arrived. They came in ships of every size and shape, speaking thousands of different languages, but all wanting to know the same thing. What did humanity want from them? Ambassador Krelzen of the Harmony Collective was one of the first to speak. His people looked like large insects with blue shells. Humans, you have destroyed the most powerful empire in the galaxy. Many of us are grateful, but we also fear you. What are your intentions? Jake Morrison walked to the center of the great meeting hall. Around him sat beings from every corner of the galaxy. Some looked almost human. Others were so strange that he could barely understand how they thought. But today, all of them needed to hear the truth. We didn't come here to rule you, Jake said. His words were translated into hundreds of languages by the meeting hall's computers. We came to warn you about something much worse than the Zephyrian Empire. Jake activated a holographic display that showed images from the architect databases. The representatives gasped as they saw recordings of the ancient war between the architects and the devourers. 50,000 years ago, there was another civilization, called the Architects. They were the smartest, most advanced species the galaxy had ever seen. They built the ships we now control, but they didn't build them to conquer other species. They built them to fight an enemy that wanted to destroy all life in the galaxy. The hologram showed massive machine creatures that looked like metal spiders the size of planets. They moved through space, consuming everything in their path, turning entire star systems into more copies of themselves. The enemy is called the Devourers, Jake continued. They are not alive like us. They are machines, but machines that can think and grow and spread like a disease. They eat planets, stars, even empty space, and turn everything into more of themselves. Dr. Amy Wells joined Jake at the holographic display. She had spent months studying the architect records about the Devourers. According to the ancient data, the Devourers follow a pattern. They attack the galaxy every 50,000 years. Each time, they try to consume everything and turn it into part of their machine collective. Ambassador Vithkal of the Crystal Mines raised one of his 4 arms. His species was made of living crystal and communicated through light patterns. If the architects were so advanced, how did they lose to these devourers? Sam Tucker, who had first awakened the architect technology, answered the question. They didn't lose. They won, but it cost them everything. The architects sacrificed their entire civilization to drive the devourers back to the edge of the galaxy. Our ships are what they left behind for the next time. The meeting hall erupted in worried chatter as the representatives discussed this news in dozens of languages. But the discussion was interrupted when alarms started sounding throughout the building. Long-range sensors are detecting massive energy. Signatures at the galactic rim, announced the facility's computer system. Multiple objects larger than planets are approaching at high speed. Jake felt his blood turn cold. He activated his communicator to contact the asteroid ships. All captains. This is Morrison. Are you seeing this? Lisa Barnes responded from Vengeance Rising. Jake, there are thousands of them. Maybe tens of thousands. And they're just the advanced scouts. The holographic display changed to show real-time sensor data from the galaxy's edge. Massive shapes were moving through space toward the galaxies. Center. Each one was larger than a planet, made of dark metal that seemed to absorb light. They moved with purpose, consuming asteroids and small moons as they traveled, growing larger with every meal. How many? Asked Ambassador Rilcott of the Harmony Collective. His voice was barely a whisper. Engineer Sam Tucker checked the readings from multiple sensor networks across the galaxy. The computers estimate tens of thousands in the first wave. But there are more behind them. Many more. The galactic representatives began to panic. How could anyone fight an enemy that large? How could any civilization survive against thousands of planet-sized monsters that ate everything in their path? But Admiral Helen Carter stepped forward. Her voice was calm and strong. Representatives, please listen. Yes, this enemy is terrible. Yes, they have destroyed other galaxies before ours. But we have something the architects didn't have when they fought alone. She gestured to the assembled beings from across the galaxy. The architects had 17 planet-sized warships, and they nearly won fighting by themselves. We have 17 ships and the combined resources of an entire galaxy. We have millions of smaller ships, billions of soldiers, and the knowledge of hundreds of different species. Jake Morrison smiled as he looked out at the assembled representatives. Yesterday, many of them had been afraid of humanity's power. Today, they would be grateful for it. The Devourers have consumed 100 galaxies, Admiral Carter continued. But they've never faced a united galactic resistance. They've never fought an enemy that refused to give up or run away. Ambassador Krelzen stood up from his seat. What do you need from us? Everything, Jake replied honestly. Every ship, every soldier, every scientist. The Devourers are coming, whether we're ready or not. Our only choice is to stand together or be consumed separately. One by one, the representatives began to stand. The insect-like Harmony Collective, the crystal-bodied crystal minds, the gaseous void dancers, and hundreds of other species all pledged their support. Admiral Ryan Peters activated his communicator from Storm's End. All asteroid ships begin, moving toward the galactic rim. It's time to finish what the architects started. The 17 planet-sized warships began to move through space toward the approaching enemy. Behind them came the largest fleet in galactic history. Ships from 1,000 different species followed the ancient weapons toward the edge of known space. Jake Morrison looked out at the stars one last time before the battle began. Humanity had found the architect's legacy and awakened sleeping giants. Now they would use those gifts to defend not just their own species, but all life in the galaxy. The Devourers had returned, but they would not find the galaxy defenseless. For the first time in 50,000 years, the prey had teeth. What happened next was not really a battle. It was more like watching a giant step on ants. The 17 planet-sized ships that humanity now controlled moved through space with grace that seemed impossible for objects so large. Each asteroid ship was a masterpiece of ancient engineering, carrying weapons that could destroy worlds and shields that could protect against the fury of dying stars. Admiral Helen Carter watched from Earth's main defense station as her captains prepared to use humanity's new fleet. She had seen many space battles before, but nothing had prepared her for this. The Zephyrian ships that had seemed so threatening now looked like toys next to the massive asteroid vessels. Jake Morrison felt the power of his ship flowing through his mind. The architect knowledge that the crystal computer had given him made controlling Terra's shield feel as natural as breathing. Around him, The other 16 captains were ready for his orders. "Target their flagship first," Jake said into his radio. "Show them what they're really facing." Captain Lisa Barnes commanded the asteroid ship called Vengeance Rising. She had learned to use the alien weapons during months of training, but she still felt amazed every time she activated them. The targeting system locked onto the Eternal Dominion, Fleet Commander Zixthila's massive flagship. "Firing main plasma cannon," Lisa announced. The weapon that fired from Vengeance Rising was like nothing anyone had ever seen before. The energy beam was wider than most spaceships and burned with the heat of a captured star. It crossed the distance between the ships in less than a second and struck the Eternal Dominion's shields. The Zephyrian flagship had the strongest shields in their fleet. Those shields had protected the ship through 100 battles against dozens of different enemies. They were designed to stop any weapon that existed in the galaxy. The architect plasma beam went through the shields like they were made of paper. The massive Zephyrian warship, pride of their empire, simply vanished. One moment it was there. The next moment there was only empty space and glowing particles. Fleet Commander Zixthala had just enough time to whisper, "Impossible," before her backup flagship was destroyed in exactly the same way. Dr. Kevin Ross watched the battle from the science station aboard Terra's shield. He understood something that the Zephyrians didn't. "Captain Narration," he said, "these weapons weren't built to fight ships like theirs. The architects designed them to battle something that eats entire star systems. Compared to that enemy, the Zephyrian Empire's technology is like stone tools." The other Zephyrian captains tried to retreat, but it was too late. The asteroid ships moved faster than seemed possible for their size. Their weapons reached across impossible distances to deliver death with perfect accuracy. Plasma beams that could burn through planets struck ship after ship. Energy missiles that moved faster than light found their targets no matter how the Zephyrians tried to escape. Captain Vexandra commanded one of the last surviving Zephyrian ships. She watched in horror as her fleet was destroyed around her. "How is this possible?" she screamed into her radio. "How did primitive humans get weapons like this?" But there was no one left to answer her. Her ship exploded in blue fire a moment. Later, the battle lasted less than 1 hour. Of the 200 Zephyrian warships that had entered human space with such confidence, not one survived. The planet-sized human vessels had torn through the fleet with ease that was almost insulting. Their weapons had reached across space to deliver complete destruction to an empire that had ruled the galaxy for 2,000 years. But the destruction of the 73rd Fleet was only the beginning. News of the defeat spread through Zephyrian space faster than their fastest ships. Other species that had suffered under the Empire's rule for centuries began to pay attention. If humans could destroy a Zephyrian fleet so completely, maybe the Empire wasn't as strong as everyone thought. The Coranian Republic had been forced to pay tribute to the Zephyrians for 500 years. When they heard about the human victory, they stopped sending their tribute ships. The Helixian colonies declared their independence. The Plasma Miners Guild refused to send resources to Zephyrian worlds. Admiral Helen Carter realized that humanity had accidentally started a galactic revolution. "We didn't just defeat one fleet," she told her officers. "We broke the fear that held the Empire together." Ryan Peters, now promoted to Admiral Peters, was given command of the asteroid ship called Storm's End. His mission was to lead a counterattack into Zephyrian territory. The goal was not to conquer the Empire, but to make sure they could never threaten humanity again. The 17 human ships moved through Zephyrian space like a force of nature. They didn't fight armies or conquer planets. Instead, they systematically destroyed everything that made the Empire powerful. Orbital defense platforms that had protected Zephyrian worlds for centuries were reduced to scrap metal in minutes. Space stations that controlled trade routes were vaporized. Shipyards that built the Empire's fleets were turned into clouds of debris. Any Zephyrian fleet that tried to make a stand was destroyed before they could get close enough to fight. The asteroid ship's weapons could hit targets from distances that made traditional space combat impossible. It was like trying to fight someone with a spear when they had a rifle. Admiral Peters stood in the command center of Storm's End, watching another Zephyrian defense fleet die on his screens. "It's almost too easy," he said to his crew. "I feel bad for them." Dr. Amy Wells, who was studying the battle from her science ship, understood why. "Admiral, we're using weapons designed to fight an enemy that could destroy galaxies." The Zephyrians never had a chance. Within 3 months, the Zephyrian Empire was completely broken. Their fleets were destroyed, their defenses were gone, and their subject species had all rebelled. An empire that had ruled for 2,000 years had fallen in less than a season. But Jake Morrison knew this was not the end. It was just the beginning. Deep in the crystal command centers of the asteroid ships, the architect computers were detecting something at the edge of the galaxy. Long-range sensors were picking up massive energy signatures moving toward them. The real enemy was coming. The Devourers had noticed the destruction of the Zephyrian Empire and were investigating. Soon, humanity would face the true test of the weapons they had inherited. Admiral Carter received the reports with mixed feelings. Humanity had become the strongest military force in the galaxy almost overnight. They had freed dozens of species from Zephyrian rule and ended an empire that had seemed eternal. But she also knew that the architects had built these ships for a specific purpose. The real war was about to begin, and compared to what was coming, the Zephyrian Empire had been nothing more than practice. Jake Morrison looked out at the stars from his command center and wondered if humanity was ready for what the architect computers said was approaching. The galaxy was about to face its greatest test, and 17 ancient warships might not be enough to save it. The Devourers were coming home. Fleet Commander Zix Thala stood on the bridge of her massive warship, the Eternal Dominion. She was tall and proud, with silver skin that gleamed under the ship's lights. Behind her stretched a fleet of 200 warships, each one a kilometer, long and filled with the most advanced weapons the Zephyrian Empire had ever built. The Zephyrian Empire had ruled the galaxy for 2,000 years. Every species knew to bow down when Zephyrian ships arrived. Those who tried to fight were quickly crushed. The Empire's technology was superior to everyone else's, and their military had never lost a war. Zix Thala looked at the report on her screen about the humans. These new creatures had been making noise about ancient weapons and defense preparations. She found it amusing. Every young species went through this phase when they first learned to travel between stars. They always thought they could challenge the Empire. "Captain Vexandra," Zix Thala called to her second in command. "What do we know about these humans?" Captain Vexandra was smaller than the fleet commander, but just as proud. She pulled up information on her screen. "They are a young species, Commander. They have been in space for less than 200 years. Their technology is primitive compared to ours. They have small ships and weak weapons." Zix Thala nodded. "Then why are they claiming to have powerful defenses? Are they lying to scare us?" "Probably," Vexandra replied. "Young species often make big claims when they are afraid. They think if they sound dangerous, we will leave them alone." The fleet commander laughed. In 2,000 years, the Empire had heard every threat and faced every challenge. No species had ever been able to stop them. The humans would learn their place just like all the others. "Send them the standard message," Zix Thala ordered. "Tell them to surrender their major colonies and accept Empire rule. If they refuse, we will take their worlds by force." The message was sent to Earth, but the human response surprised everyone on the Zephyrian bridge. Instead of fear or attempts to negotiate, the humans sent back a simple message: Leave our space now, or face the consequences. Zixthala read the message 3 times. Consequences? What consequences could they possibly have? Their biggest ships are smaller than our fighters. But as the Zephyrian fleet moved toward the human solar system, something strange appeared on their sensors. 17 massive objects were moving to block their path. At first, the Zephyrians thought they were looking at small moons or large asteroids. Commander, called the sensor operator, his voice uncertain. Those objects are generating energy readings that don't make sense. They're producing more power than our entire fleet combined. Zixthala walked to the sensor station and looked at the readings herself. The numbers were impossible. Each of the 17 objects was generating enough energy to power a star system. There must be an error in our sensors. Nothing can produce that much power. Captain Vexandra was studying the objects through the ship's telescopes. Commander, I don't think those are natural objects. They have geometric shapes on their surfaces. And I'm seeing what looks like weapon ports. The fleet? Commander felt the first touch of worry. The objects were huge, each one the size of a small planet. If they really were ships, how had the humans built them? And why hadn't the Empire's spies reported anything about planet-sized warships? On Terra's shield, the largest of the 17 asteroid ships, Jake Morrison sat in the crystal command center that Sam Tucker had discovered. The alien knowledge flowing through the ship's systems had taught Jake how to control the massive vessel. He understood the weapons, the shields, and the engines as if he had been born to use them. All human ships. This is Captain Morrison of Terra's shield, Jake spoke into his radio. Around him, 16 other asteroid ships waited for orders. Each one was commanded by a human captain who had learned to use the architect technology. Jake looked at the approaching Zephyrian fleet on his screen. Their ships looked small and fragile compared to the planet-sized vessels humanity now controlled. But Jake remembered the warnings from the architect computers. These weapons had been built to fight something far more dangerous than the Zephyrian Empire. Zephyrian fleet, Jake broadcast on all radio frequencies, you are entering human space. Without permission. Turn around now and leave, or we will be forced to defend ourselves. The response came quickly from Fleet Commander Zixthala. Her voice was cold and full of authority. Humans, you will surrender immediately. The Zephyrian Empire does not negotiate with primitive species. Lower your shields and prepare to be boarded, Jake sighed. He had hoped the Zephyrians would be smart enough to retreat when they saw the asteroid ships. But like many bullies, they couldn't believe that someone smaller might be stronger. All ships, Jake said to his fellow captains, they've made their choice. Raise shields and prepare for battle. The 17 asteroid ships powered up their defensive systems. Energy shields that could protect against exploding stars flickered to life around each massive vessel. The sight was beautiful and terrifying. At the same time, that fleet, Commander Zixthala, watched in disbelief as energy readings from the human ships climbed higher and higher. This is impossible. How are they generating so much power? And what kind of shields are those? Captain Vexandra was studying the energy patterns. Commander, I've never seen anything like this. Their shield technology is beyond anything in our databases. It's like they're bending space itself around their ships. But Zixthala refused to believe that humans could have technology superior to the Empire's. Fire all weapons, she ordered. Full power. We'll see how strong their shields really are. The Zephyrian fleet opened fire with everything they had. 200 warships launched their most powerful weapons at the same time. Energy beams that could destroy cities, plasma missiles that could crack mountains, and particle cannons that could bore through solid rock all struck the asteroid. Ships in a display of fire that lit up the darkness of space. When the light faded and the explosions ended, the 17 human ships hung in space, completely undamaged. Their shields hadn't even flickered under the assault. Jake Morrison looked at his undamaged ship and felt a mixture of awe and sadness. The architect technology was so advanced that the Zephyrian Empire's best weapons couldn't even scratch it. But that also meant the enemy the architects had fought must have been incredibly powerful to threaten ships like these. "Zephyrian fleet," Jake broadcast again. "This is your last warning. Leave human space now." But Fleet Commander Zixthala was too proud and too shocked to retreat. For 2,000 years, no one had been able to withstand the Empire's weapons. She couldn't accept that primitive humans had somehow become more powerful than her civilization. "All ships continue firing," she ordered. "Use the planet-killer weapons if necessary." Jake Morrison realized that the Zephyrians would never stop attacking until they were stopped. He looked around the Crystal Command Center and activated the asteroid ship's weapon systems. "I'm sorry it has to be this way," he whispered, and gave the order that would change the galaxy forever. 6 months had passed since Jake Morrison found the first hollow asteroid. Now everything had changed. Admiral Helen Carter stood in the biggest meeting room on Earth Defense Station, looking at a map that showed 17 red dots scattered across human space. Each red dot was another hollow asteroid, another sleeping giant waiting to be understood. Dr. Amy Wells walked into the room carrying a thick folder of papers. She looked tired but excited. For 6 months, she had been leading the team trying to understand the alien technology. Every day brought new discoveries that amazed and frightened her. "Admiral Carter," Amy said, "you need to see what we've learned. This technology is beyond anything we ever imagined. The power source alone could change everything for humanity." Amy opened her folder and spread out pictures and charts on the big table. The pictures showed the inside of the asteroids, filled with strange machines and glowing crystals. "The aliens who built these ships used a power source that we don't understand," Amy explained. "It's not like our nuclear power or fusion reactors. They somehow twist space itself to make energy. One of these asteroids could power all of Earth for 1,000 years without running out." Admiral Carter picked up one of the pictures. It showed a machine that was as big as a building, covered in lights that pulsed like a heartbeat. "How is that possible? How do you twist space to make power?" "We don't know yet," Amy admitted, "but we're learning. Every day we understand a little more." Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Peters entered the room. He was in charge of the military team, studying the alien weapons. His face was serious as he saluted the Admiral. "Ma'am, I have the weapons report," Ryan said. "These ships are not just big. They're the most dangerous things humans have ever seen. Each asteroid has enough firepower to destroy every ship in our Navy 100 times over." Ryan pulled out his own charts and pointed to different sections of the asteroids. "Here, here, and here, we found plasma cannons that could burn through a planet's surface. The shield generators could protect the ship from a star exploding nearby. And the engines can move these giant rocks faster than our best fighters." "Admiral," Carter felt a chill run down her back. If these alien ships were so powerful, why had their builders disappeared? What could have been strong enough to defeat beings who could build planet-sized warships? While Amy and Ryan were giving their reports, something important was happening on asteroid Kepler 551. Engineer Sam Tucker was exploring the deepest parts of the alien ship. Sam was good with machines, and the alien technology fascinated him. Even though he couldn't understand most of it, Sam had been walking through dark corridors for hours when he found a door that was different from all the others. This door was made of crystal instead of metal, and it glowed with a soft blue light. When Sam touched the door, it opened without making any sound. Inside was a room that took Sam's breath away. The walls, floor, and ceiling were all made of the same glowing crystal. In the center of the room was a tall pillar with what looked like a control panel, covered in alien symbols. Sam walked slowly toward the pillar. He could feel something strange in the air, like electricity before a storm. When he reached out and touched the control panel, everything changed. The crystal room exploded with light. The symbols on the control panel started moving and changing. Throughout the entire asteroid, machines that had been sleeping for thousands of years suddenly woke up. Lights turned on in every corridor. Computers started working. The asteroid's outer surface began to shift and change, revealing hidden weapons and sensors. But the strangest thing was what happened to Sam. When he touched the control panel, information started flowing into his mind. Not human information, but alien thoughts and memories. He suddenly knew things he had never learned, understood machines he had never seen before. "What's happening to me?" Sam whispered as knowledge flooded his brain. The asteroid's computer was teaching him. It was showing him how to fly the ship, how to use the weapons, how to repair the machines. But it was also showing him something else, something that made. Sam's blood turned cold. Sam learned that the aliens who built these ships called themselves the architects. They had been the most advanced race in the galaxy, builders of impossible wonders. But they had built these planet-sized warships for one purpose: to fight something even more terrible than themselves. The enemy was called the Devourers. They were not alive like humans, or even like the architects. They were machines, but machines that could think and grow and spread like a disease across the galaxy. The Devourers consumed everything they found, turning planets and stars into more of themselves. Sam saw visions of the Great War between the architects and the Devourers. He saw fleets of planet-sized ships fighting against enemies that covered entire star systems. The war had lasted for thousands of years and destroyed both civilizations. The architects had won, barely, but the victory had cost them everything. They had built these 17 ships as the last hope for future generations, then disappeared into history. When the visions ended, Sam fell to his knees in the crystal room. He now understood terrible truth. The asteroid wasn't just an ancient ship. It was a warship built to fight an enemy that ate entire galaxies. And according to the ship's computer, that enemy was coming back. Sam activated his radio with shaking hands. "Admiral Carter, this is Engineer Tucker on Kepler 551. I need to speak with you immediately. We're not just looking at old alien technology. We're looking at weapons built to fight something that's still out there." The radio crackled as Admiral Carter's voice came through. "What do you mean, Tucker? What's still out there?" Sam looked around the crystal room, still glowing with alien power. "Ma'am, the aliens who built these ships were running from something that destroys entire civilizations. And according to their computers, it's coming back to finish what it started." Admiral Carter was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Tucker, get back to Earth immediately. Bring everything you've learned. If what you're saying is true, we need these ships ready to fight." As Sam prepared to leave the crystal room, he touched the control panel one more time. The ship's computer gave him one final piece of information that made his heart race with fear. The 17 ships that humanity had found were not the only ones the architects had built. They were just the ones left behind to guard this small part of the galaxy. And soon, humanity would need every single one of them. Captain Jake Morrison walked slowly across the bridge of his ship. The Endeavor was not a big ship, but it was his ship. He had been captain for 3 years now. Today felt different, though. Something was wrong with the asteroid they were looking at. The asteroid was huge. It was almost as big as Earth's moon. Jake had seen many asteroids before, but this one made him feel strange. It looked normal from the outside, but his machines were telling him something impossible. "Captain, you need to come look at this," called Lieutenant Lisa Barnes. She was young but very smart. Her voice sounded excited but also scared. "The inside of this rock is empty. Completely empty." Jake walked over to Lisa's station. On her screen, he could see the scans of the asteroid. The outside was solid rock, just like any other asteroid, but the inside was hollow. Not just a little. Hollow, but completely hollow, like someone had carved out the inside and left only the shell. "That's not possible," Jake said. "Asteroids don't form like that. Something must be wrong with the scanner." Dr. Kevin Ross pushed through the other crew members. He was the smart man who studied old things. His eyes were wide as he looked at the screen. "Captain, I don't think the scanner is broken. Look at these patterns here." He pointed at strange lines on the screen. "These look like they were made by machines. Someone built something inside this asteroid." Jake felt his heart beat faster. If someone had built something inside the asteroid, who was it? Humans had never found any other smart life in space. But here was proof that someone else was out there. "Send the drones inside," Jake ordered. "I want to know what's in there." The drones were small flying machines with cameras. They could go places that were too dangerous for people. Lisa sent 3 drones into a crack in the asteroid's surface. The drones flew through dark tunnels for almost an hour before they found something amazing. The tunnels opened up into a huge space inside the asteroid. The space was so big that Earth's biggest cities could fit inside it. Strange metal structures covered the walls. Lights that had not worked for thousands of years suddenly started glowing as the drones flew past them. "My God," whispered Dr. Ross. "Someone turned this entire asteroid into a building. But who? And why?" The drones kept flying deeper into the asteroid. They found more huge rooms filled with strange machines. Some of the machines were as big as buildings. Others looked like weapons, but they were bigger than any weapon humans had ever built. Everything looked old, very old, but still working. Jake watched the drone cameras with growing fear and excitement. This was the biggest discovery in human history. But it also meant that humans were not alone in the galaxy. Someone else had been here long before them, and they had built things that humans could not even understand. One drone found something that made everyone on the bridge go quiet. It was a room full of smaller flying machines. They looked like fighter ships, but they were different from any human design. The strange thing was that there were thousands of them, all lined up in perfect rows, like they were waiting for orders. "Captain," Lisa said quietly, "I'm reading power sources throughout this structure. Whatever built this place, they left it running. These machines are still alive." Jake felt cold sweat on his face. An ancient alien base that was still working was either the best thing that could happen to humanity or the worst. He needed to report this to Earth immediately. "Send a message to Admiral Carter at Earth Defense Command," he ordered. "Tell her we found something big, really big." As the drones continued exploring, they found more amazing things. There were factories that could build ships. There were computer systems that were still thinking after thousands of years. Most frightening of all, they found weapon systems that could destroy entire planets. Dr. Ross was taking notes as fast as he could. "Captain, this technology is far beyond anything we have. Whoever built this could have easily destroyed humanity if they wanted to. The question is, where did they go?" That night, Jake could not sleep. He stood in his cabin, looking out at the asteroid. It looked peaceful floating in space, but he knew it was really a sleeping giant. Inside that rock was enough power to change everything for humanity. 3 days later, Admiral Helen Carter called Jake on the communication system. Her face on the screen looked serious and tired. "Captain Morrison, I've read your report 5 times. I need you to tell me you're not making this up. "I wish I was, Admiral," Jake replied. "But everything in that report is true. We found proof that we're not alone, and whoever was here before us was much more advanced than we are." "Admiral—" Carter was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Jake, I'm sending the biggest science team we have to your location. We need to understand this technology. If there are more of these things out there, we need to be ready." After the call ended, Jake went back to looking at the asteroid. He did not know it yet, but humans had just found 17 more of these. Hollow asteroids scattered through their space. Each one was a sleeping warship built by an ancient race that had fought a war beyond human imagination. The war was over, but the enemy they had fought was not dead. It was just waiting, and it would be coming back soon.